Yo, it's Jared and welcome to this game. This game is round 3 of the Doeberl Cup Major Section 2017. I had just come off a loss in the last round, so I was hoping to do well in this game. I had the black pieces against my opponent, which is Felix Wyss. His rating is 1531, and here we go. He opened up with d4. I should mention that for my preparation for this game, I was talking to one of my chess club members, and he was actually paired with this player in round 2, and he also had black, and they also reached this position in their game. Bishop f4 is sort of known to be not very good for white, and it's because of the move d takes c4, which both of us played. I played this move because my chess club colleague told me that, yeah, this is the best move, and this is the way that black should play if he wants to have an okay game. The most normal moves in this position are knight c3, and we basically go back into a regular Slav defense. After bishop f4, surprisingly the most popular move is actually just knight to f6, which in my opinion doesn't really set white much of a challenge. So I played d takes c4, which was planned. He played pawn to e3, and it was actually this moment which I was out of book. For my preparation, I mainly looked at the move pawn to e4, and I looked at some really nice lines, and it basically seemed like white was on the edge of losing, like really close to losing. But then he played the move pawn to e3, and yeah, I wasn't really sure what I was doing now. I played b5, which was the idea of taking on c4, so I can keep this pawn. He played a4, and I played e6. Rather than playing the move e6, it was also possible to play the move bishop to b7. And after takes, c takes, knight c3, a6, black is just better. White can also play here the move knight to c3. This may be a tiny bit better, since taking on b5 would open up my bishop on b7. But here black can just play the move pawn to a6, and it's basically the same thing. If white ever takes on b5, then black's going to take back with the c pawn, and he's going to have his bishop opened up on the long diagonal. But in this position, white also has the option of playing moves like bishop e2 and bishop to f3, since the c pawn is in the way of the black bishop. Of course, white will need to be a bit careful, as black might play c5, but this is an idea that white can go for. But I played e6, takes, and he played the move knight to c3, which turns out to be not so good. A better move was queen f3, which of course hits my rook in the corner, so I need to do something about that. Fortunately, I have a move. I can play queen to d5. And then white can play the move bishop to e2. So if black takes the queen on f3, white can just take back with the bishop, and we'll lose my rook on a8. So that wouldn't be possible. But he played the move knight to c3. And here I played a bad move, and this move should have cost me the game. I played bishop to b4, which is a howler. I should play the move queen to b6, and black has a nice advantage. And it's important to mention that I can't play a move like pawn to a6, as white can simply take on b5, because the rook on a8 would be hanging at the end of the line. But, as mentioned, I played bishop to b4, and my opponent played queen to f3. And this is a very common idea, but I just simply missed it. Here I actually thought I could maybe hold on with the move queen to d5. It's a nice looking move because the knight is of course pinned and can't take my queen. But he just plays queen g3, and now I'm in big trouble. The knight is hanging, and he intends to capture on g7 and take my rook on h8. So here I spent a long time, and of course I'm basically just losing here, because I'm going to lose a piece. But sometimes you have bad positions, and you just need to try to find a way out. If white was an engine, then of course black would just lose really, really easily. But fortunately, I'm not playing a computer, and people do tend to make mistakes. So I played knight to e7. Of course, he took my knight. Castles. It's also possible to play the move knight to f5, which forces white to play queen c7. Castles. And after knight e2, black just plays a5, and it's actually not so easy to play this for white. I checked with the engine, and the engine says the best move is king to d1. I mean, who's playing king d1 here? I'm not quite sure why this move is played, but it just says to me, okay, if this is the best move, then it's not so easy for white to win this. These two pieces, I mean, white's up a piece, but it's going to be tough for him to save his bishop on b8. So this would have been interesting. Rather than playing the move knight to e2, white can play the move bishop e2, and this gets really, really crazy, because black now has a fantastic move, knight takes e3. Okay, if you take this knight, queen takes g2, hits the rook in the corner. The best move is queen g3. If you play bishop to f3, white just takes on b2, and this is not clear at all. If white plays the mentioned queen g3, black will play bishop to b7. And this bishop is hanging, and I have at the same time protected the queen on b7. So we might see a line like this, which is just completely crazy. The best move being bishop to f3 and capturing on f3. If you take the rook on h1, white just takes on a8, and at the end, white is up a piece and has reasonably good chances to win this. White should win, basically. So the better move is to take the bishop, and after knight takes, rook fb8, white still should probably win, but it's not so easy. But black can also take the rook. Why can't black just take the rook in the corner? If black takes the rook, bishop to f3, looks like it wins the queen, because it does win the queen. But at the end of the variation, queen g1, you lose your bishop on b8. So it's better to first insert this move bishop to e5 with a checkmate threat, forcing g6, and only then play bishop to f3. And black's just completely lost. So all this means is white probably shouldn't take the knight on e3, but instead should opt for the move bishop to f3. Bishop takes c3, b takes c3, knight c2. This line is completely crazy. And bishop b7. I mean, who is going to find these moves? But g4, I mean, at the end of this line, b4, white is probably winning. But it's super difficult to play. e5 is a cool move as well. Just trying to activate pieces. Unfortunately for black, he has to take the queens off the board here. But I think black maybe has some chances to hold this position. If black can get these pawns off the board, the fact that white's up a piece won't matter, and this game will just end peacefully. So basically all of this means that knight f5 was better than the move that I played. I just castled here. And now, in this position, white should play simply bishop to f4. And he just keeps his piece and should win the game reasonably easily. My opponent played queen to e5, and this is actually the move that I thought that he'd play, and it's a move that I thought was best as well. It turns out this was a big blunder, and black can actually get a nice edge if he finds the right move. It turns out that the move that I played, which was to go back to b7, is also just really good for black, but I have a much better move. So if you'd like to pause the video, try to find the best move for black. Okay, the best move for black is pawn to f6. Never play f6. This is a move that I just didn't look at because I basically just have these rules, just don't play f6. So I just didn't look at this move at all, but it makes a lot of sense. It attacks the queen, which is protecting the bishop on b8. And if you take on d5, all of a sudden this is a big problem. White is basically forced to give back the bishop now, with bishop to d6. Takes. And we get this variation where black is a little bit better. You can't take on c4. King c2 is the best move. You can't take the pawn on c4 because after a6, knight a3, knight e3 wins for black. You have to play the move pawn to a6 first, as if you play knight to e3. This is actually not going to win after takes, bishop g2, because white has the resource knight c7. Takes, bishop e6 check first, and then takes on h8. And this should be a draw. Therefore, in this position, after bishop c4, you have to play a6 first, so that black goes back to a3, and only now go for knight e3 and win the rook in the corner. White can of course take on e6 with check, but after just king h8, white will lose the rook on h1. Since white can't take the bishop on c4, the best move is probably king c2, and then after rook f to c8, black can keep this pawn, and black has an advantage. So f6 would have been very good for black, but also the move that I played is not bad either. I mean, just going back to b7. The problem for white is he has this bishop. It's hard to save this piece. White's up a piece, but the bishop doesn't have anywhere to go. White played the move that I had expected, bishop to d6, and I just took on d6, which is just a really bad move. I think the problem was that I was in real shock that I had just blundered this piece, that I thought, alright, I basically have to take on d6. But once again, I have the move f6, and I actually get the piece back here, because queen f4, I just play g5. And the problem is, if he ever goes to g3, I have knight f5, and I just, whoops, not that arrow, and I just win the bishop. But I played bishop takes d6, which is a terrible move, and now I am just losing. I played f5, and he played f4, which is not really necessary. It was better for him just to play knight f3. My idea was to play f4, bishop e2, but this is really just nothing for black, and white will just castle next move and is just a piece up for nothing. But as mentioned, he played pawn to f4. I should probably point out at this point that for the whole game, my opponent was playing really quickly. Like really quickly. He didn't spend much time on his moves at all, which gave me some hope that I might be able to come back in this game, which, as you'll see, happens. So after f4, I played b4. He played knight to a4, and I jumped into d5. Knight c5 and queen b5. And in this position, he played the move king to f2, which does win, but it's once again just not necessary. You can just play knight f3 here. And black doesn't really have any decent moves. I can try a5, which is a move that I was looking at. bishop e2, a4, but after these moves, I mean, I'm just completely lost. If I take the pawn on e3, which looks nice, he just takes on e6. Rook e8 and knight c7, and I can just resign. So, you know, if he just plays normal moves, he can win the game reasonably easily. But he played king f2, and I played knight to f6. He was concerned about my knight potentially jumping into g4, but it's really just a check, which is why he played h3. But he, once again, should just play knight f3. Knight g4 is just a check. He just goes to g1, and the next move he'll play h3. My knight will need to go back, and then he can get his pieces out and just win. So after h3, I played a5. My idea was to play rook to a6. And if he plays knight takes rook, I have knight to e4 check, and I win his queen. And in this position, white played a really bad move. He played b3, which actually at the time looked like a really good move to me. The problem is what happened in the game. Now, I won't show what I played just yet, but first I would like to mention he had a much better move, queen e5. And this actually prepares the move, pawn to b3. Now that's kind of a hint for what happens next. After b3, pause the video and see if you can find the move that I played. Okay, so after b3 I played queen takes knight. This pawn to b3 move was a really big blunder. At this moment the engine is saying that white's +5. And after b3 it's completely equal. So b3 was a total howler, and which let me come back in the game with queen takes knight and knight e4, so I can get my queen back. Takes, takes. But I said that I got my queen back and that now it's equal. Unfortunately, I play a bad move again. I played bishop b7 check, which looks really normal. Better was to take on b3 right away. And we'll see the reason. After bishop c4, I have the move a4. And the bishop is protecting my pawn on e6. This is the reason why I shouldn't give the check. So he played, after bishop to b7 check, he played king f2. I took the pawn and he played bishop c4. And this is the problem. I don't have time for a4, as he'll take the pawn on e6 with check. So I played bishop d5, he trades, and he played really quickly rook a4. So the whole game, he's been playing moves instantaneously, basically. His time has only really gone down by maybe 5 minutes, whereas I'm down to about half an hour. If he had just spent a little bit of time, he would have been able to win this game. But since he was playing moves instantaneously without much thought, I was able to come back in the game. And as you'll see, I played the move rook f to c8. But I should mention, rather than rook a4, it was also better just to play knight f3. a4 and just rook b1. And the problem is, now if I play like a move like rook f to d8, he just jumps into e5, and if I take on d6, I just lose the b3 pawn. So this should win fairly easily for white. But he played rook a4, and I played rook f to c8. He played knight e2, rook c2, and now he actually made the losing move. White is winning if he plays the move d7. And the reason this is winning is he intends to play pawn to d8 queen, and my rook needs to keep an eye on the a pawn. So once he plays pawn to d8 queen and I take with the rook, he just takes on a5, and these pawns are just weak, and I'll just lose them both. So d7 would have won him the game, but he played really quickly rook b1, and he overlooked my next move. If you like to pause the video, try and find the best move for black. I played the move rook to a2. and white is losing now. In the game he played rook takes b4. The problem is if he plays rook takes a2, b takes rook a1, I can play b3, and the pawns don't roll home just yet because he has knight c3, but he's going to have to sacrifice his knight for these two pawns, and I'll be up a pawn in a rook and pawn ending, and it should be a win. For example, king e2, king e6, say he gives back the piece, a4, I take on d7, and this should be a win. Not completely sure, but it should be a win. So he plays rook takes b4, pawn takes, rook b8, king f3. And now, the engine is probably right. The engine wants to play the move king to f7. And I really did not want to do this because of knight d4, and white's knight gets active. And this is not fun. And the engine just gives really big numbers here and says that black's just completely winning. But it's not so easy. If I play, like, rook here is apparently the best move, but he attacks my f5 pawn, and sort of a normal move would be g6. But now after knight c6, it's equal. He just attacks my rook and attacks my b4 pawn. And the engine wants to play rook back to a8 and just offer up the rook on b8, so I'm not doing that. So after king f3, I just took this piece. I just don't want the knight to be on the board anymore. King e2, king f7, d7, king e7, d8 queen, and we get to this position, which should be a win for black. There's a bit of work that needs to be done though. g4, takes, h4, h5, and now in this position he plays the move rook b2, which made the win really easy. It would have been a lot harder to win if he had played the move rook to b1. The reason for rook b1 is after b3, king c3, king c5, he wants to put the king on b2 and not have the rook caught behind the b3 pawn. So now white is able to move his rook and to use his rook to try to capture some pawns. A sample line would be rook e8. This would have been very, very difficult for me to find. The moves themselves make sense, but basically I need to get to a position where I have the h pawn, and the h pawn will win me the game. But of course it's a lot of work. Now I activate my king, bring my king up the board, he finally takes the pawn, rook c2, king f3. This is of course a really long line, but it's important to show this. This is the type of line that I would have had to find if he had played rook b1 rather than rook b2, which he played. And now in this position it's very, very important to play the right move. King e5 is the right move. If you play h2 after king b2, this is now a book draw. Black cannot win this position. Basically what white will do from now till the end of time is play king a2 and king b2, just over and over and over again. So king e5 is the move, and the idea is the black king is going to come up here, this rook will move, and you'll be able to push the pawn home. So we'll see this in action. Rook h8, king f4, black just brings the king in. There's really not much that white can do about this. And now rook g5 check is the key move, and the king comes out, and the pawn will roll home. As if you give a check, you'll just go king here, and if he checks on the side, you go here, and the pawn just runs home. It's an easy win. But of course, not easy to see this. Definitely not. So this game would have gone a lot longer if he had found the key move, rook to b1, with the idea of moving the king onto b2, rather than having the rook passive on b2. Because after rook b2, it's a very easy win now. I just play b3, and now the rook is passive, which is never a good thing. He played king c3, played king c5, and he played rook g2. He tries to get active, but at this point it's just too late because of b2. Takes, takes, king takes, and d4, and the black king will enter the position and win the pawns. And in this position, my opponent resigned. So it was a very up and down game where I was just losing right out of the opening, but sometimes you have these games and you just need to make the most of it. And if my opponent had spent a bit more time, he would have been able to win this game. He had, you know, you have 90 minutes per side, right? So you really need to just, when you get the winning position, just use your time. Use the time that you have to find the best way to play so that you don't give your opponent any chances. You don't want your opponent to have chances to come back in the game. You just want to win the game. But as mentioned, he just played way too quickly and he let me back in the game, and I even won the game, which is just crazy. But sometimes this happens in chess. I hope you enjoyed this game, and I'll see you in the next video for my round 4 game. Thanks for watching.